Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into an incredible story. How a simple craving for, pepper in Europe ended up sparking this huge global power struggle. It led to the rise of empires and, ultimately, the colonization of India. It's an amazing story of greed, ambition, and, believe it or not, the surprising power of spice.
So really, why would an entire continent risk everything for simple peppercorns? It seems kind of crazy, right? Well, the answer boils down to two things: a ridiculous amount of profit and the power that comes with it. This whole quest for flavor, it didn't just change what people ate. No way. It completely redrew the map of the world and kicked off the chain of events that would go on to shape modern India.
Okay, so picture this. It's the 15th century, and Europe is absolutely desperate for all the luxury goods from the East. We're talking fragrant spices, shimmering silks, beautiful cottons. But there was a big problem. The overland routes, the famous Silk Road, they were totally controlled by middlemen who had a stranglehold on this incredibly lucrative trade.
And because they had this monopoly, they could jack up the prices to, well, astronomical levels. I mean, we're talking about a 100-fold increase. A small bag of peppercorns that cost next to nothing in India could literally be worth a small fortune by the time it got to Venice. So you can see, this wasn't just a simple markup. It was this massive, powerful incentive for European nations to say, okay, we've got to find our own way to the source and cut out the middleman.
And that brings us to Portugal. You got to remember, this is a pretty small nation, kind of tucked away on the edge of Europe. But they decided to take this monumental gamble. They started pouring resources into a super daring plan to find the sea route to India by sailing all the way around the treacherous coast of Africa.
And just look at how fast this all went down. I mean, it's incredible. Vasco da Gama gets there in 1498, right? And just 12 years later, they've already captured the key port of Goa. This wasn't some slow, gradual process. This was a lightning-fast, aggressive takeover. The Portuguese were making it very clear they weren't just there to trade. Nope. They were there to stay, and they were more than willing to use force to make that happen.
Their whole strategy had this cool name, the Blue Water Policy. They knew they couldn't really take on the huge Indian empires on land. They just didn't have the manpower. So they decided, let's control the sea instead. Their ambition was to basically turn the entire Indian Ocean into their own private lake, controlling every single ship that sailed on it.
So how did they pull this off? Well, with cannons, mostly. They set up this permit system called the Cartaz, and the rule was simple. Every ship, didn't matter if it was Indian, Arab, whatever, you had to buy this permit from the Portuguese to sail. And if you didn't have one, your ship, your cargo, your crew, all sent straight to the bottom of the ocean. This was basically state-sponsored piracy on an absolutely massive scale.
Now, as you can imagine, Portugal's success and the insane amount of wealth they were pulling out of India sent these huge shockwaves all across Europe. All the other nations like the Dutch, the English, the French, they saw what was happening and basically said, we want a piece of that pie. And just like that, the great European rush for India was on.
And here are the main players who jumped into the game. You've got the Dutch, who showed up aiming to completely dominate the spice trade. Then came the English, who were interested not just in spices, but also in India's incredible textiles. And finally, the French got in on the action, ready to go head-to-head with the English for supremacy. The key thing to remember here is that each of these powers didn't just bring merchants. They brought soldiers and warships. The Indian coast was about to become a battleground for European rivalries. But out of all these big, powerful contenders, how did the English end up winning it all? It really wasn't just luck. It was this perfect storm of naval power, some seriously cunning diplomacy, and a whole lot of strategic patience.
It all really kicked off with one decisive naval victory. See, the Portuguese had been the top dogs in the region for over a century, but the brand new English East India Company decided to challenge them, right where they were strongest, at sea.
The year was 1612, and this is the moment everything changed. At the Battle of Swally, a tiny squadron of English ships went up against a massive Portuguese fleet, and they won. A stunning victory. Now, this wasn't just a military win. It was a huge signal to the powerful Mughal emperor that there was a new kid on the block, and they meant business.
That victory was the key that unlocked the English playbook. See, instead of just using brute force like the Portuguese often did, which, by the way, alienated a lot of local rulers, the English played the long game. They used cunning diplomacy. They sent envoys like Sir Thomas Roe straight to the Mughal court, and he spent years, literally years, building relationships, showing respect, and asking for trading rights.
It was a totally different approach. And this is a brilliant illustration of how they built their power base. It wasn't one big invasion. It was a series of really smart, opportunistic moves. Bombay, they got that as part of a royal wedding dowry. Madras was built from scratch on land they got from a local ruler. And Calcutta, that started in a few small villages that got permission to use. They were patient, they were strategic, and man, were they effective. But the final piece of the puzzle, the real game-changing advantage, it wasn't won on the battlefield or in a negotiation. It came as a gift, directly from the Mughal emperor himself, a royal decree known as a Firman.
1717. You could say this was the year the English East India Company hit the jackpot. The Mughal emperor granted them that Farman, which basically allowed them to trade in the super-wealthy province of Bengal without paying any customs duties at all. Think about that. This one single document gave them a massive, almost unfair economic advantage over every single one of their rivals. It really did pave the way for everything that came next.
Okay, so with this incredible economic power in their hands, how did the English finally clear the board and knock out all their rivals? Let's take a look at the final scorecard of this long and often bloody competition.
By the middle of the 1700s, the game was pretty much over. The Portuguese, they were just a shadow of their former selves. The Dutch, they'd been defeated and had decided to focus their energy on Indonesia instead. And the French, after losing a whole series of wars, were no longer a serious threat in India. The English East India Company had gone from being just a trading corporation to the undeniable de facto rulers of a vast and incredibly wealthy land.
This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? They came for pepper, but soon developed a taste for the land itself. That's the heart of the story. They started out as a business, right? Focused on making a profit from spices, but that slowly, strategically, morphed into a quest for political power. They figured out that to really control the trade, you had to control the land. And that single realization, well, it changed the course of history. So that leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? Was this whole thing inevitable? Was a private company's takeover of an entire subcontinent just bound to happen? Or was it just a series of incredibly risky gambles that paid off spectacularly? You know, whatever you believe, this transformation of a company of merchants into the rulers of an empire is one of the most extraordinary stories in world history, and it sets the stage for the next, very different 200-year chapter of British rule in India.